Hello and welcome back to the Charlton All-Time Fantasy 11 Transfer Specials. And as always for these specials, I have the most premium guest we can afford, audio royalty, Mr. Charlton Live himself. It is Greg Stubley. How you doing, mate? You well?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Yeah, I don't know whether to feel honoured or a bit like that's the
I'll
most
feel honoured.
bored. So you're scrambling down the back of the sofa to get anything you can. I'll take anything, mate. I'm happy. It's good to be back with you, mate.
The fees are pint, and that's all we need. And at the moment, it's an online pint because I haven't been back to any games. How was Wimbledon? Because last time we spoke, we just drawn against Palace, and we were kind of like, this feels good. And from all reports, Wimbledon was a bit of a damp squib. Didn't feel well. What I heard from Nathan Jones when you spoke to him didn't sound like it was that great.
Yeah, well, I wasn't there Saturday, so I can't comment too much on terms of. I did watch the game, but I was at work, so it's kind of like doing some work, looking how we're doing. If something happens, then I'll flick across. So, from what I could see, it was a bit disappointing. I think I try not to look too much into preseason in general. I think the thing that was a bit not worrying, but maybe a bit of concern was that against Crystal Palace, we were really good out of possession and we were patient in our build up when we did have the ball. But we looked fit. We looked like a team. And I think from what I saw against Wimbledon, the thing I didn't really like was when we did have the ball, we were really wasteful with it. We went long quite a lot of long diagonal balls. And, Wimbledon are a physical side. And I think it was a good test because the teams we struggled against last season, and for a while, to be honest, has been the physical sides. Those sort of games, you'd hope that if you could match them physically, you'd win the game anyway. I didn't think we did. So I definitely think it's a good opportunity now for Nathan to regroup with the squad and say, look, we've got a game against Portsmouth on Saturday. Again, they're going to be a physical outfit. Here's what we went wrong last weekend. This is good practice for us. And it'll give Nathan a bit of clarity in terms of what his starting 11 will be. I mean, that starting 11 last weekend won't be the starting 11 against Wigan, no question about it. So, you're hoping that there'll be one or two more before the start of Wigan. It sounds like there could be a goalkeeper soon, we hope, should other departures go. So gradually we're going to get stronger before the end of the season. And at the end of the day, as long as we are stronger than we were last season, then we'll have a better season, hopefully.
It makes sense. I mean, that sounds simple enough, doesn't it? But we've had great squads that have done terribly and had terrible squads that have done amazing. And like you said, you can't read too much into the pre-season. I remember I've said it on here before. When we played Aberdeen, I thought we were going to be great that season. Then Holden sacked within 4 games, so you can't judge it too much. But it is a bit. I don't know if I'm concerned, but the fact that he, like you said there, it's whether or not he knows what his starting 11 is. It'd be great if we do get more players in, but how does that scupper it? He's only going to bring people in that are going to strengthen it, but where do you build the team? Whereas I think what that showed against Wimbledon was Jackson's been there a long time now. He's built a team. And unless I'm getting the facts wrong, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? That he knows he probably is only bringing in 1 or 2 rather than what we're looking at, which is a complete rebuild, losing our 2 best players from last year, or 3 really, with Blackett Taylor going earlier in the season.
Yeah, and it's a gradual process. Sadly, at the moment as a club, I think credit to the ownership who've given Jones the tools early doors this summer. We've made some really good. We've done a lot of good things off the field as well. Apparently, the Valley looks incredible at the moment, both in and out of it. And that has been needing a bit of TLC for a while. And there's these little things going on at Sparrows Lane. In the recruitment department, there's more additions. I'm led to believe that we're getting some more people with sports science. We're getting more people involved in the scouting side. So gradually you feel as a club, we should improve. What we want is stability. But we also are impatient as a fan base. And rightly so. We've had some utter tripe over the last.
And it's been in our history, considering this is looking back over the whole time at Charlton, it's our worst ever period, isn't it?
Ever. Yeah, it's been our worst ever periods for certainly since I've started doing the commentary. It's not been enjoyable for a lot of the seasons that we've covered. I think what's more concerning is that we've not competed at all. You know, I mean, a disappointing season for Charlton fans is not getting the playoffs, but it's not a case of we've been finishing 7th and 8th. The last 2 seasons we've been finishing, was it 14th, 15th last season, and then
Way off
13th the year before. So we're gradually not getting closer. And unfortunately, League One's getting stronger and stronger. There's more money in League One now. There's more, there's big teams in League One that haven't had good owners or, you know, are trying to rebuild again. I mean, Wigan, who we played first game of the season, it wasn't long ago that they were winning the FA Cup. So, you know, it's going to get harder for us. So we need to do these building blocks in the back end. And look, if we don't end up having a brilliant season, but can fall back on that and have enough resource to build again, then good. But you're hoping this summer window is a window where we're signing players who can be at Charlton for a while and can improve us gradually. We've taken a couple of risks with some of the signings in terms of we've spent money on players who are a bit younger, who have had League One experience and looking to now play the top end of League One. And I say they're risks because if they don't perform well, you've spent a lot of money on them and then you've got to try and flog them afterwards. So we're trying to build squads that we can build for a number of years and play with for a number of years, rather than just signing players who might be good League One players, get to the Championship and be like, oh, we haven't got enough Championship players, we need to completely rebuild. They don't want to do that. They want to sign players who can compete at League One level and the Championship, which might surprise people because they think, well, we're losing 2-0 to Wimbledon. There's no chance somebody's signed can compete in the Championship. We know that's not how football works. You know, we've got players that have Championship experience, players who are playing in the Premier League last season. So, you know, you hope that they'll be able to come, and even if they're squad players next season, they'll be able to help guide the younger players across to the next level.
It sounds lovely. Who do you tip? Who do you tip for winning it if it's not Charlton? Because when I look at Birmingham and how much money they're spending, and I've been watching the Wrexham thing on Disney. There's a couple of clubs there that you think, wow, they could really do something. Whereas last year, like, no one seemed to want to win it. It was a terrible league. But who would you pick? Who would be your favourite number one at the moment?
I mean, you can't go beyond Birmingham for the fact that they've spent a lot of money. And to be honest, some of the players they signed are a bit unknown. There's a lot of players from Europe, the second division of the Bundesliga, some of the Dutch divisions, and you know, players like that might be fantastic or might come to England and not settle. You don't know. Obviously, we know about Alfie. I think the biggest question mark with Birmingham is their manager. He's unproven. You know, he might well be the next best manager. We don't know, and it's an inspired move, and he does a fantastic job. But if they have a poor start, if they draw the first 3 games, if they lose to a team they shouldn't lose to, we've been in this position. The expectation level's so high when you've been in the league above for a while or been in the Premier League. You expect that you come down to League One and you're going to walk it, and you spend all this money and you're expected to walk it. If you start slow, you don't win your first couple of games, and the pressure builds, then it can get ugly. So it's all about their start. If they start well and by, say, end of September they're in the top 3, I think they'll win the league. If they start slow, I think they might still get playoffs, or they should get playoffs, no question about it. But it might take them a bit longer. So Birmingham, I'm predicting, will do well for obvious reasons. I think there's some other teams that might be some to watch out for. I mean, you could include us in that, in terms of, like, no one's really saying we're going to be the best team in the league, but
which they were last year. Last season, we were everyone's tip to get at least playoffs, wasn't it? And
I think this year, because of the Nathan Jones factor, we will have people backing us this year as well. For me, it's weirdly the teams that have kind of sustained after last year. So you look at teams like Blackpool. Blackpool could have a brilliant year, and that there's nothing special about Blackpool in terms of they haven't signed anyone you've gone, oh, that's incredible signing, but they've got a manager who has gotten promoted before. They finished just outside the playoffs. They could have a good season. Bolton is a team that's always up there. I felt quite confidently last season that Bolton were going to get promoted. This season, as it stands, I don't think their squad's quite as strong, but there's still obviously a month to go in the transfer window. They could turn around and sign Paris Maghoma on a permanent deal, who was one of their best players last season, and suddenly they're much stronger again. So, you know, again, that's another team you should never write off. But there's other teams as well, like Peterborough. They've lost a lot of players. They've replaced them with one or two good, promising players from non-league and League Two. They might be gems.
Yeah.
Rotherham's made a lot of signings. Have Steve Evans. They'll be ugly to play against. They'll make things difficult. They've got experience. No question why they can't finish top. So look, it's going to be a really tough league like next year. But the way I see football, you want it to be tough. You don't want to play easy teams every single week because if you lose against them, that that makes you depressed. I think if we lose to good sides who spend a lot of money and we play well, I haven't got a problem with that. I think I just want us to be much more enjoyable to watch, hopefully.
Can I just say that I am sick? I'm so sick of the argument that Charlton are better against good teams. It does my head in. Why would you be better against better teams? I understand the argument because obviously, and you're doing so well keeping your concentration while you've got an ice cream van outside as well. Really well done.
That's just my ringtone, mate. That's
is it? Oh, okay. No worries. But I'm so sick of that being the argument because players do raise their game. When we saw how, like when we went to United, where every player grew an extra couple of inches and everyone stood a bit taller. Fair enough, but you shouldn't be turning up at teams that are worse than you and putting in a worse performance. It's ridiculous to accept that. And I'll be honest, I think Jones won't let that happen. I think there's less chance of that happening under Jones than there was under Appleton, probably than there was under Holden as well. But it's going to be a tough league. You're right. You do have to raise we're going to have to be at our best, and you want to play the best teams. It'd be nice to smash a couple of shit teams 4-5 now and again, though, just for a change. Just be nice.
Mate, it'd be nice to have a really good start. You know, we have suffered with our starts the last few years.
Won the first game last year, though, didn't we? 2-1. I was there, and like Dobbo scored, and I was like, right, that is us now.
It was a bit.
It wasn't a great game, was it?
It was against Lane Orient, wasn't it? What was it? 1-0. Dobson
2-1. We won 1-1.
I thought it was one of our rare clean sheets last season.
You might be right.
Yeah, and the problem with that was that it felt like, okay, we won the first game, but we knew our squad wasn't good, so we were like, okay, hopefully we're going to add to it. And to be fair to the ownership, it was late in last summer, so everything felt quite last minute and never really felt structured. Whereas this season, as I said, because we've made 7 summer signings already, by the time we play Wigan, that might be 8, 9, 10. You don't know. You hope then that, okay, we're in a strong place now. So if we don't start the first game, or if we play well in the first game but only win 1-0 or something, you go, okay, we've got more to give here. So yeah, I look at those first 3 games as well. Wigan away is a tough start. Getting a win away from home will give you confidence straight away. Go into that home game against Leyton Orient, you might even get a big crowd because we've won that first game, a lot of excitement and energy going into that at the Valley. And then that's followed up by another home game against Bolton. So if you win the first 2 games, you go into a tough third game with so much confidence and excitement and hopefully a good atmosphere at the Valley. And that's what we've got to try and build. We've got to build momentum. We've got to go to games thinking, look, if we go to Wigan and get a point but play well, I'd probably take it first game of the season. As long as we don't lose. But I would also like us to have the mentality of we can go there and win. We can win that game. And that would only come with the players and the time we've got with them to hopefully kick on.
In fact, you look at it. So Wigan, Birmingham in the Carabao Cup, Leyton Orient, then Bolton, and then away at Reading. That could be a really tough August, couldn't it? That's not. None of those are easy games.
Yeah, Reading at this stage, you feel it's good to play them earlier in the season because they haven't had their takeover yet go through. So they've not been able to sign anyone. They've clearly got a good manager in Ruben Sellers, who did a brilliant job with them last year. They've got one of the best academies in the Football League and have produced some brilliant talent over the last couple of years. So you're hoping if we play them early that we'll be stronger and they might be missing 1 or 2 for injury and not having the backup. Sounds very selfish, but I think getting them early is quite good. But it is a really tough start. We had a tough start last season. Like that August last season was really tough, and that's why when our squad wasn't ready or anywhere near ready, to be honest, we felt it. We went away to Peterborough and actually played really well. We're unlucky to lose 1-0, but they just had that extra little bit of quality that we didn't have to get over the line. Played Oxford, it was 1-1. We didn't play well. This is Dean Holder's last game, and we should have just hung on for the point. We ended up losing 2-1. So
looking back at it now, what do you take last season and think, right, well, it was a nightmare, but where we are now with Nathan Jones, we're in a much stronger position? Or do you still think that? Or I'm saying this. I don't know if this was your opinion. It was certainly mine. Holden was massively mistreated. He needed to at least have the January transfer window, knowing that we might not be in a great position now.
Well, firstly, I think we'll be miles ahead of what we were this time last year. I genuinely do believe that, and that's not because of the strength of the players we signed. I just think we're so much more settled. I mean, from January onwards, we lost. From February onwards, we lost 2 games in 3 months or whatever it was.
We also drew a lot.
No question about it. We weren't great, being honest. We played. There was 1 or 2 really good performances away at Derby, away at Cheltenham. We were really good. There's a couple of home games, Barnsley home, we were good, but we weren't perfect. No question about it. And we drew a lot of games. But my point to people is Nathan came in when we really felt like, where was the next win going to come from? He inherited a squad that hadn't won. It was joint record, wasn't it, for Charlton not winning a game in our history, like length of time. So he inherited a squad that was young, that was a bit all over the shop. We made January signings without a manager because we were planning for Michael, and Michael wanted these players in. They've come in, and then it's not happened with Michael. So it wasn't an easy job at all. And the aim was just to stay up. Let's just stay up. There was talks of so many different interim managers behind the scenes, maybe just to start keeping us up till the summer and then trying to appoint a Jones.
Yeah.
So it feels like we're so much more settled. Now, that doesn't always equal guaranteed results. But a settled squad, which I believe we have currently, or very close to having, we're a little bit bloated in certain areas still, and maybe a little bit light in others. Certainly,
is Fraser still there? We haven't got rid of him yet, have we?
Fraser's still there. I think Jones has made it public that we're looking to move Fraser, and
I know how difficult this is for you to comment on, because you can't. I know how you can't say either way. Like, you don't want to be in anyone's bad books or anything. But yeah, exactly as you said, Jones has made it really clear that he doesn't. I don't think he wants him there, does he?
No. Look, I think Scott as well is got a home in Scotland.
Yeah,
got a young child, and it's been tough for him at Charlton. I don't think it's all been his fault. It has been tough. Like, I was really excited when he joined. But he joined us after, he was one of Ipswich's marquee signings, and got played out of position. Came to us, struggled with COVID, and and then the shenanigans that have gone on with us. And I don't know. I think he has more to give in his career, and I hope he does go find a home and do it there. But it clearly doesn't work. I don't think he's a Nathan Jones type player.
I think he's a bit of a luxury player, a bit of an Ericsson or a Berbatov, like first touches in his head kind of thing. I think, 1, he doesn't have the players around him to be able to play like that, and 2, as Charlton fans, and I think as Jones as well, we want people who work their bollocks off and cover every blade of grass. I've said it 100 times about Klaus Jensen. Like, when I was watching him, I was like, I'd rather have John Robinson on the pitch getting at everyone than Klaus Jensen playing these amazing balls over the top. And I've always been like that. So for me, I'd rather have a Dobbo than a Fraser. But I agree with you. It's not all been his fault, but it'd be nice to lighten that, because we've got a lot of centre midfielders now.
Yeah, and I still think it's an area we need to improve, in terms of, not necessarily we need to improve Doherty or need to improve Coventry or need to improve Berry at all, but I just think we need a little bit extra there as option. I think we need another creative midfielder, or maybe another creative wing back, because I felt watching us in pre-season, we have created chances, but maybe not on a. There was a good comment I saw online the other day was saying we haven't really got a player in our team that we will look to when things are going tough. It's early to call things like that, because someone like Greg Doherty might be that player, or Luke Berry might be that player. But I know what they were getting at. We haven't got a big, not name, but we haven't got a player that you feel like, right, he's going to be the one that if you take him out, we're going to struggle. Or
like a talisman type of thing.
Yeah. So that might develop. It might be someone like Hadme, it might be Godden, it might be Berry. That might happen. It catches us by surprise a little bit. But I remember thinking that during the Chris Powell era too. Maybe Wright Phillips might have been the player that we thought would get our goals. But I don't know. I think, as I said, we're gonna see hopefully a little bit more movement. I think there will be movement in and out over the next couple of weeks to the month, and hopefully going to be much stronger. Apparently, Nathan Jones loves an extra signing. So even
Oh,
free, yeah, I speak to a friend of mine who's a Luton fan saying that he loved like just grinding out that extra 1 or 2 signings to see him over the line. So
I think we need it, and like you said, we've got Pompey still. That's going to be a great game. It'll be interesting to see how much of a first team we put out because you got to worry about injuries and stuff like that as well, haven't you? Like you don't want to. That's got to be part of it as well. It's like we've got a friendly, which is great. I want to see how you get on, but your players that you know are fine, and like your Lloyd Jones, who you know is absolutely fine. You know where he's going to play. Is it worth risking him in a friendly? That's all to be taken into account as well. And today we are looking at. We were 21 minutes in. I'm finally going to mention what we're actually going to do. So these are the transfer specials, and we're going to look at the best ever loan players that Charlton have had. Found it very, very difficult, but that's another point as well. As far as I'm aware, we haven't had a single loan player come in yet. I mean, obviously, it's likely to happen a bit later on than the permanent signings. But is that a bit unusual? You surprised?
It is unusual. I mean, I think it's a good thing. So there's good and bad things with loan. The good things are they don't cost so much. So that's why they're so popular in our league because teams can't really afford permanent signings. So we'll go to an Arsenal or Chelsea and hope to get the best young talent who are desperate to play. And so the names we're going to mention today are we've been lucky enough to have them. Teams have got promoted with good loanees coming out of them. Plymouth a couple of years ago had Morgan Whittaker and Barley Mumba as well. So teams can get promoted with them. It's not a case of, you get some loans, but you get some good memories and that's that. I think the reason we're not getting loans is down to Nathan Jones. I think Nathan Jones at Luton didn't really have loans, had 1 or 2 maybe in the squad, and clearly feels that maybe there's no real reason to have them. Maybe you can't build a future with them because if we get any good Premier League loans, they're just going to go to the Championship the following year if we don't get promoted, or if we do get promoted, they'll be too expensive to buy permanently. So, I understand it. I think if you can get permanent signings, you always will because one, you might be getting more buck for your money. You might be able to build with that squad for a number of years. And you look at, again, let's go back to that Chris Powell team of 2011-12. We didn't have too many loanees in that squad. And that was during a time, to be fair, where you could sign loanees during the season. I think until March, you could sign a loanee. So if we had a couple of injuries, we could go to the loan market and get a couple in. But off the top of my head, we had Leon Court on loan, the centre half, and a couple of others, maybe Darryl Russell, I think, came along, Hogan, Efran, and a couple of others. But it wasn't like they're our main players. We built the core of the squad through permanent signings.
Yeah.
And these were the kind of like squad toppers. So you're right. We might be looking to try and get 1 or 2 on loan, or we might go, you know what? Let's carry this squad until January. And if we need a bit extra in January, if we used all our money, then we'll look to loan market in January. But it's clearly a design tactic for us this season not to have one.
I mean, it's difficult, and I get it. I'd rather have permanent players than loan players. Of course you would, but you look at the last 10 years, a lot of our best players have been loan players, and that's, for better or worse. I mean, we're going to obviously talk about
I think that's for worse, isn't it? I mean,
because look at where we are. If it was for better, we wouldn't be in the bloody League One.
But also, like the majority of these players, like some we're talking, have gone on to do incredible things. And the opportunity not to sign players permanently has costed us. If we, I don't want to give too much, right? We'll come on to it. We'll come on to it.
Should we dive straight in then? Should we get on with it? Okay, cool. So what we do, those of you who haven't seen any of the previous ones, me and Greg will pick our 5 best from 5th to first worst one to the best one. Loan players that we've seen play over the last, Greg, since he started watching. I do try and go back into the archives a little bit more, but I'll tell you what, loans is hard. It's hard because I don't think they were that popular before the Premier League. From what I've found a couple, and I did scour through the forums and that kind of thing, and there were a couple of guys that got mentioned. But if you want to try and find a clip of some of those players, it's impossible. So it is really hard to judge. And I'm starting to feel a bit bad for Tyler and Josh, who who were adamant that they were only going to pick players for their all-time 11 that they'd seen. But yeah, you're right. It's hard to choose players who you haven't seen. But as we've done, you can base it on records, appearances, how many goals they scored. But again, for loans, it's almost like you can't really judge it on appearances, because a lot of these guys, the better they do, the quicker they get called back to their main club. So it's a tricky one. Loans. Did you find it easy? I know you sent me a list of about 10 and I went, right, well, who am I going to pick?
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I've deliberately tried to leave you a couple, haven't I? I tried to leave you a couple so we can actually have a bit of a battle.
Yeah.
I've gone maybe based on a combination of talent, and one or two is based on how well they did on loan for us, if that makes sense. So there's one that isn't as talented as maybe the others, like certainly not as talented as a couple of yours, but was with us for a couple of years on loan, if that makes sense. So I felt like that was a great loan signing, because we had him not only 1 year but 2 years, and both years he was outstanding for us. And we'll come on to him specifically who I'm talking about, but I did find it tough. And also I did ask you in WhatsApp if we're picking players that started off on loan and then become permanent signings.
Yeah, I've done that, by the way. Sorry.
you were adamant. You're like, no,
it's so hard. It's so hard because
let's start with your fifth. Let's go through it.
Should we go for my one?
Yeah, let's start.
We'll go for my one first.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one I massively screwed you over on, because I do only remember him being a permanent player. But actually, when I went to the rest of them, I was like, oh, there's another guy in here that played even less appearances permanently, and I only remember him as a lone player. So yeah, it is winner of goal of the season 2001, Sean Bartlett. So massively screwed you over there, because he's one that was on your list, and I said, I don't really remember him being a lone player. I only really remember him as a permanent. But that's why I put him as my fifth, because I don't feel like it's fair. But I genuinely just remember signing him. But he played 18 games on loan from FC Zurich, and he scored he played 17 games, scored 7 goals in that time, which is unbelievable return. That ratio is ridiculous. And then he plays 105 games for us when we sign him permanently, and he only scores 17. And I was like, well, that ratio difference really says a lot. But yeah, Sean Bartlett, one of my favorite ever strikers. I'm gathering one of yours as well.
Yeah, well, I actually own. No, not Sean would ever know this. I partly have to own an apology to Sean, because when I was a 6, 7, 8-year-old Charlton fan who was used to watching Premier League players score multiple goals for the club, I couldn't really understand why we had a striker who just didn't score. And it kind of blew my mind that everyone loved him. And obviously, when you're that age, you don't really have any concept of what goes on off the ball. You don't really have a concept of, I'm looking at, we're playing a 4-5-1, and Sean Bartlett's a lone striker who scores 4 or 5 goals a season. And I never saw him as a loanee, which is one of the reasons why I couldn't technically have him on my team. But yeah, I owe an apology, because I used to think you're nothing special. And it wasn't, again, it's hindsight's a wonderful thing, but it wasn't until he left and then we saw some of the players that came in.
Yeah.
And you start going, no, Sean Bartlett could do that. Sean Bartlett is miles better than that. And Sean Bartlett was that. And then you get much, much older, and then you watch clips again, or you speak to the likes of Brownie or whatever, Curbs or whoever, or fans like yourself who are there and watch us every week. And then you go, no, I completely got this wrong. But you look at the achievements he had for Charlton in terms of the teams he played in, the matches he was involved in, some of the strikers he played with.
Yeah.
And I still stand by. He obviously wasn't our best player during the Premier League years, but what a commitment that he gave to the club and for Curbs. And he was, it's the sort of player which we long for now, in terms of like that hard-working number 9, and hopefully we've got a couple in the Charlton squad this season. But yeah, what a great addition for Curbs on loan initially, and then a permanent signing.
Is he a bit like your favourite ever Jan Kermigan, that kind of similar kind of character, do you think?
Maybe character. Jan was more of a flair player.
Right.
Jan was kind of like a mix between Bartlett and Di Canio, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So he didn't have the pace and the silkiness and the balance of Di Canio. He was a bit more of a. He was incredible in the air. Jan you know, I know you didn't really follow Charlton too much during that period, but if you went and watched him, he won almost every header. Yet he wasn't the tallest player on the pitch.
Right.
You know, he had a great leap, but technically was outstanding. You could brilliant touch, brilliant control, could do overhead kicks, 35-yard volley. So I actually think a mix between the two. He had the work rate of and the height and the physicality of Sean, but a bit of the flair of like a Di Canio. So you know, you can probably understand why he's such a popular player and why I loved him with that description.
Always smiling as well. Just seemed like he enjoyed his football. He played 74 times for South Africa, scored 29 goals, went on to be a manager, went to Kaiser Chiefs after us as well, which is my favourite named football team of all time, I think, just because of the band. But yeah, so that's my first choice, Sean Bartlett, and he is going up against your fifth choice, which is this guy here. Oh, I think this one's muted because it had a really, really bad track underneath it. So it's Jezreel Saki. And I mean, talk a little bit again about how good he was when you saw him the other day for Palace against us. Do you reckon he's going to stay there this season?
I mean, Palace should keep him, no question about it. He is a wonderful talent. I picked him because when he came to Charlton, he had a lot of expectation from Crystal Palace themselves. He featured in a couple of Premier League games before he came to the club. And this game that we're actually watching now, the Plymouth at home, was his debut. And I remember him picking the ball up really early on and making chances. I think this is this game. Did he score? No, it went over the bar. I was like setting up for a wonder strike there. But he was a play. He came in straight away, and we went, wow.
Yeah,
like, we all went, wow, this is a player.
And yet, when you look at him on the sideline, or when he's just standing still, doesn't look anything, does he? Just doesn't look like
he's a bit old school for me. He's a bit like he's a bit like what I imagine when people first saw someone like Ryan Giggs, where he's completely raw, but he's got an incredible balance. So he drifts in and out of players. And he's got a brilliant finish. Like he's got a wonderful left foot. That he's a clever player, really clever, intelligent player. Incredibly humble. He drives a Nissan Micra, which is a story I love telling.
Oh, really?
I don't know if he's still got it, but he was on a good contract at Palace, and I think he's on a better one now. And yeah, he drove a Nissan Micra. But I think I mentioned this when I saw him against Charlton in a friendly earlier this summer, that I think his biggest weakness is personally at this moment in his career, he loves that right hand side and touchline, and he can drift infield, he can drift centrally when he's playing off that right. But I think when he starts centrally, he goes a bit missing, and he's a bit quiet, and he hasn't got the kind of physicality with back to goal to kind of hold up play and bring others into his game. I think for him, he is naturally a right winger, a bit like a Saka type player who has a big potential to play there. It's just whether Palace see a successor to Elise or not. But in terms of a loan signing, in what was one of our worst seasons in our history, he was by far way and above any of the other players. His talent were huge.
Do you know the only one I'd say is up there with him was Miles at that time? Like
we had
some
good players. Yeah. Miles came through. TC came through that year.
Yeah.
And we had Corey Blackett-Taylor on the left hand side, and we had real dynamic front three of Blackett-Taylor, Leeburn, and Jez. But in terms of actual what he gave to Charlton that season, he scored 15 goals, was it, for us that season? Player of the year. And for a Crystal Palace player to get that, it says a lot. And I don't think many Charlton fans would begrudge him if he did well for Palace. I think we would all secretly be slightly happy. We would hope it's for another team. But if he goes on and has a good career, that's the main thing, because I think he loved Charlton as well. He was a really nice, quiet lad, and I interviewed him quite a few times because he was the only player who did well in a game or something. So I had to interview him quite a few times, and I used to try and make it a task to try and get a smile out of him because he was so quiet. But by the end of the season, he started to really open up a bit, and you could tell that he was starting to learn how to be a professional footballer on a weekly basis. So yeah, he was my choice for this 5.
So what do you reckon? We've got very different players. One player goes on and signs for us and plays a lot of games. Another player has a huge impact in only a short space of time. But did play 40. Rak-Sakyi did play 43 times that season, scored 15 goals. So as an attacking midfielder, that's a good return in a terrible team, like you said. I think I'm still going to. Well, I don't know actually.
To be honest, mate, we can't put a Palace player in this top 5. I'm going Bartlett.
All right, I'm going to hold you to that later on as well. Okay, great. So Bartlett 1-0. Lovely stuff. Okay, so choice number 4. I'm going to go with your one first. Your one is this guy here. That's Christian Bilic scoring, making it 1-0 against Doncaster. Did you commentate on that game? You must have done.
Yeah, I did, mate. Yeah, special memories. Yeah, we went pretty nuts for that.
I'm embarrassed to say I missed the semis. I was at the final, but yeah, by all accounts, that was one of the best games there's ever been at the Valley.
It was a long night. It was a long, stressful night. I remember thinking when that goal went in, right, that's it, we were at Wembley. And I think, unfortunately, so did quite a lot of our players because we completely switched off and then showed a bit of inexperience and nerves. But yeah, that goal is one of my favourite. I mean, the Valley was rocking. It was loud. It was so loud. And I'll try and find my commentary one day from it, but we had to scream and shout to get our words out because we commentated, and we're going back to there this season actually, but it's in the upper west stand, and on the front row you have like a massive press row, and that's where or we did at that time anyway, and we will for this season. And you've got the fans directly behind you, so literally here will be the fans. So when we're commentating, they're screaming, and it's fantastic, and I love it. And I also had my fiance next to me that day as well. She was to the right as well, and she was like going nuts. So it's a really good memory. So I picked Christian for a number of reasons. One, because of that goal. That is a reason. He was in my opinion, alongside another player we might mention, who I won't name, was one of the best players at Wembley in the final.
Great.
And I personally think as loan signings go, you sign someone who hadn't had a lot of football, but clearly had a bit of talent. And Lee Bowyer got the most out of that talent, and we saw him develop in a midfield role. He joined us as a defender who could play midfield, and then he ended up becoming this midfielder who had flair. I love flair players. A midfielder, a defensive midfielder who had complete flair. And I think if it wasn't for injuries, he wouldn't be in League One this season. He would be maybe even Premier League, because I think his talent is huge. But as loan signings go, he helps us get promoted. He's got player of the match in the final. I felt like in what was my favourite season as a fan and a commentator, I had to include him.
He had a bit of a rocky start before he came to us as well, didn't he? Because he was at Arsenal, then goes to Birmingham on loan, plays 10 games for them, doesn't score. Then goes to Walsall, doesn't play at all. Then he comes to us and he plays 31 games and scores 3 goals. I mean, you kind of think, right, that's where Gallen, Bowyer, Jackson were working at their best, finding those players who cost nothing, hadn't done anything, but they still managed to see them and pull that out of them and put together a squad that goes up and through the playoffs as well. I mean, that's pretty. It shows. I was gutted when that 3 sort of started breaking up, because I really felt like you had such a structure in place. You had Bowyer, who's got a bit of celebrity about him. People know who he is, know what kind of a player he was. I mean, we signed a lot of good centre midfielders at that point, and I think that's down to them wanting to learn from Bowyer. Because again, I can't ruin it, but a lot of the players on this list are centre midfielders and happened during that time, and they would have come because they knew what Bowyer was about, and he was a sort of a bit of a nasty midfielder who worked really hard to get the ball back, but also had some technical ability as well. Done it at the highest level. I mean, that's him, Gallen being able to bring him in, and then Jackson coaching them. I mean, it was a perfect little trio. I mean, I don't think we're in a worse position now with Jones, but I think it's taken us an awful long time to get back to anywhere near what we had under Bow.
Yeah, well, you got to remember as well, like we were scrapping at that time. We didn't have, Roland de Châtelet openly admitted that we wanted to sell the club, so he was in the process of selling the club at the start of that season. So we literally had no players. We started the season away at Sunderland with 5 players on the bench, 3 of which were academy graduates who hadn't even played for us before.
Yeah,
so we were fighting tooth and nail to sign players, and Bielik, I think his debut was against Accrington away, so it would have been middle of August from memory. So he was kind of thrown in the deep end straight away, and it depends who you talk to about who was the main instigator for these loan signings. Some of them were Gallen and Bowyer went and saw them together. Some will be claimed by Thomas Dreesen, who was involved with Roland de Châtelet. I think the Bielik one was one he put forward, but the way Steve Gallen personally with Thomas Dreesen was that he took a player that was recommended by Thomas Dreesen, and then would go, okay, you can have that one if I can have these 2, kind of thing. So people like Darren Pratley were a Steve Gallen and Bowyer suggestion, whereas a Bielik might have been a Dreesen. So we'll never know the full truth, who signed what, but we certainly, around that time, as you mentioned, when we signed Christian Bielik, it wasn't like, oh, this player's incredible, he's got amazing ability. He actually started fairly slowly for us. It's the fact that Bowyer was able to get the most out of him, and we were able to give him the games to play in that role as well.
Okay, so going up against him, I've got another one that I genuinely remember this guy as being a lone player. Didn't remember signing him, but again, he played a lot of games for us permanently. It's Zizi.
It's bent. It's the bar. Back in by Sheng-Chi. Well, time stood still. Everybody watched, held their breath as Sheng-Chi guided the ball into the back of the net.
Sheng-Chi. Any memories of him?
Yeah, I remember Sheng-Chi. Yeah, I remember. He was a loan, wasn't he? Was he a Les Reed? I think he might have been a Les Reed.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I only remember him being a lone player, but I didn't realise he stuck around for a long time, didn't he? He went down with us. Yeah. He was in. I mean, that squad that he went down with was really good. When we went down under Pardew, like, we had some great players in that team, but it just didn't seem to work. And I guess that's the restructuring of the club and trying to recover after Kirbishley going and all that sort of thing. But him and another lone player that was playing centre midfield with him, we had a strong team there.
Yeah, I mean, we signed, as you say. I think the problem was it was too little, too late, kind of thing. I don't think any Charlton fan blames Pardew necessarily for relegation that year. Is obviously what followed, but I think a lot of Charlton fans still dislike Mr. Pardew for. But Zen was a good player. He was a useful player. Popped up in the right positions, and again, if you had him from the start of the season, I think if we had the squad that we finished the season without the start of the season, we'd have been absolutely fine. We wouldn't have been great, but I think we'd have been absolutely fine. So it was just that start of that season. We had a lot of rogue and a lot of wasted potential on players as well. But yeah, Zen was a goal scoring midfielder, wasn't he? He was quite.
See, this is the thing. I remember him being an absolute terrier, getting in and around everyone, absolute hard worker. But yeah, looking back at some of the clips, like you said, he scored a lot of goals, and he came in as number 9. I mean, to come in as number 9, he was playing right wing as well. I don't remember him playing in that position at all, but he created a lot of stuff there. He was a good creator as well as a fighter.
Yeah, I think isn't he assistant manager at China now? I read somewhere. I think he's the actual.
I'm subtly trying to bring up these Wikipedia, so I don't.
Yeah, he definitely. He's definitely gone on to be a coach and a manager for sure. But I suppose we've got such bad memories of that period that it just never really gets remembered. There's quite a few players around that time that we just don't really have memories of.
No.
And I think that'll be the case for some of the players we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh, 100%.
Now then, a few years' time, you just go, I can't even remember him.
It's hard, isn't it? Because doing this channel, like, part of it is a lot of how you judge players is what they've won and how well they did, which isn't completely fair. When you think about Dobbo, like, never really winning anything, and how good Alfie May was last year, those kind of players, like, it's going to be hard to judge them in 10 years' time because they'll just go into the ether. But like Matty Holland went down as captain that season, and he did so much for the club, but he didn't really move us on. Whereas there's certain players that came along and really lifted the club. Like Kinsella came along and actually was part of this team that made everything better. But that's the difference between judging it as a team, I guess, and judging the individual. And I don't know which way round is the right way, but it's hard not to do that.
No, but that's what's fun doing this. Like, we're not picking players. You know, if we're picking players based on their ability, like, I wouldn't be picking quite a few players I've picked. Even Jez, fantastic ability, but he never played Premier League for us. So how can I compare him to a Sean Bartley? You know, but that's what's enjoyable about this. We're talking about what they did for Charlton and how they were for us, not necessarily how they were as players. So, I look for this one. I'll be honest. I'm probably sticking with Bielik.
I think you're right. I think that impact was great. I mean, so looking back at Zheng Ji's career, he'd only played 12 games on loan for us, and he scored 1 goal. Then he plays 55 games and scores 8, and obviously that's the season we go down. But then he goes off to Celtic and plays a few times there, and plays another 250 games at another team I can't pronounce, Guangzhou, which is probably a Chinese team, I'm guessing. But then that's where he takes over manager, and he's still assistant coach. He's assistant coach for China now, the national team. So he goes on to have an incredible career. And he played, I mean, it's not like he came to us a newbie. He played a lot of games before he came to us. But I just remember him being an absolute workhorse in the middle of the park and always working hard. And that's why I like I'd have a Zheng Ji in every position if I could now. Just someone who works that hard with a bit of talent as well. It goes a long way. But yeah, I think you're right. Just for like, how can you not give it to the guy that gets man of the match in the playoff final? That'd be ridiculous. So we go 1-1. There we go. Lovely stuff. All right, on to the next one. And do you want to go with yours or do you want to go with mine?
No, I like the fact you're doing them first this time.
Okay.
Gives me time to prep.
Okay. So, this is my guy.
Zheng. Here's Alex Song. Off the inside of the post from Alex Song. And suddenly this game has come to life.
Now, Alex Song is a player that I remember as being absolutely world class. He turned up, and I remember watching him going, he is not, like, he's worlds above us. Like, how have we managed to get someone like this? He's come from Arsenal. He's a centre midfielder. He's unbelievable. But it is impossible to find a clip of him doing anything that well. That's the best clip I could find of him. But he was an incredible player. Goes on to play for Barcelona, obviously. He only played 12 times for us. But again, it's sort of like another couple of guys we're going to mention. Players like that have a big impact and they really lift everyone. And suddenly everyone raises their game around them. But yeah, at one point we had Song and Zizi in the middle. That's a centre midfield pairing that could rival anyone, I think, in the Premier League. Like, they were two unbelievable players, and Song going on to play for Barcelona and playing 50 times for his country as well. He was an epic player. Have you got many memories of him at all?
Not loads with Charlton. I can't remember how many games I would have seen at the back end of that season.
Yeah.
Because if he arrived in January, I wasn't a season ticket holder that season. So say Charlton had 10 home games between January and the end of the season, I might have seen half of them. So I might have only seen him like 5 or 6 times for Charlton. A player I've picked later on, I saw a little bit more in the second half of the season because my dad's friend had a season ticket and he went on holiday for ages, so we had a season ticket, so we went a little bit more often. So my memories of Song is not as, like, I'll tell you someone I remember, and I hope you haven't picked him because it'd be a spoiler if not. But when we signed Francis Coquelin from,
oh no, I haven't. Good shout.
I thought because he weren't around during those periods much, so I thought you might not have seen him. So I felt comfortable saying it. But when we signed him, there was a lot of people saying, "Oh, it reminds me of Song," and then Coquelin went on to play for Arsenal and Villarreal and I think Valencia, and he's had a really good career since. And what you're saying about Song sounds a bit similar in terms of he plays 1 or 2 games. You're like, how is this guy playing for us in while we were in the Premier League then with Song, but Coquelin in the Championship with us. And then you see players go on and play for Barcelona, and Son was brilliant for Arsenal, by the way. He's a brilliant talent. Him and Fabregas and playing for Percy, they had a really good spine. But yeah, I think from a Charlton point of view, I don't remember. Not to say he didn't do well for Charlton, he clearly did, but I don't remember a game or a moment or something where he changed us as a team, which is not. It wasn't his job. He was a young midfielder on loan. Like he learned from us and then went on to do really good things for Arsenal and then Barcelona as well. So if we're talking purely talent, he might even be the best loan signing we've ever had in terms of talent. If we're talking purely what he did for Charlton, it'd probably be a bit lower. But
yeah, it's a tricky one because again, I'm going off memory. I remember being at all the games he played and him having a huge he just seemed to. I've seen him describe. Arsenal described him as the South African, the Cameroonian gladiator, and that's what he was. He was massive. He was big. He was in charge of everything, dominated. But then he could obviously play, and he played amazing balls through. But I sort of remember him keeping it more simple. But he did have that technical ability. That's obviously what develops when he goes off back to Arsenal, when he goes off to Barcelona. He was a really, really strong. It was someone you turn to. You mentioned it before, like someone you'd rely on to go, right, okay, Song's there, he'll sort this out, he'll win this ball, he'll win that battle in the midfield. So that was my choice in the middle of the park. You have gone for someone I think we're a little bit more familiar with more recently. Oh, this is another one that I've had to pull the music out of. So you've gone with Josh Cullen. Why would you go with Josh Cullen, Greg?
You know how much I love Josh Cullen, mate. He was in my all-time Charlton team, which I think a lot of people would be incredibly surprised by. Honestly, I can't speak highly enough of him as a football player. I think he is so underrated in what he did for Charlton. I think he's so underrated in his career. I think he made a couple of not bad choices, but choices that haven't progressed his career probably as quickly as he'd have liked. I think in an ideal world, we'd have stayed up in the Championship and signed him permanently, and he'd have achieved great things for us for years. But let's talk about him for Charlton first of all. When he joined on loan, he had a bit of a bad loan spell, I think, the year before at Bolton. I think he had one successful loan spell at Bradford.
Well, I was going to say this. I found it unusual that he'd got loaned to us for 2 seasons. Now, when you look on his Wikipedia, he actually had 2 seasons on loan at Bradford as well. So it's obviously something that clubs like to keep him, not enough to buy him. That seems unusual, doesn't it?
Well, I think West Ham wanted to keep him as well.
Right.
So we've actually got a player in Colin Coventry who's similar, where these players did really well in the academy, and they've got obvious talent, but maybe could break into that first team. So they went on loan quite a few times.
Well, Dobbo came from West Ham as well, didn't he? From the West Ham academy.
Yeah, it was around the time of Cullen. Not Cullen, sorry. Coventry. It was around that time, I think. So I'm drifting now, getting confused. But yeah, they did. They all came through West Ham initially, I think. So Cullen went on loan, I think, to Bradford first of all. So I didn't actually know he went there, or couldn't remember that he went there for 2 different loan spells. But I remember he was one of their best players. He might even have won some sort of like Player of the Year or got second Player of the Year or whatever. Right. But then he went to Bolton in the Championship the following season under Phil Parkinson, who I think had him at Bradford, and he didn't do anything really. He didn't really play a lot.
12 games apparently, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't play a lot, and wasn't really thought of someone who could play regularly at that level because he wasn't getting the game time. And Bolton were a little bit of a physical side there, so weren't really a ball-playing team. And I remember when we signed him thinking, oh, that could be a good signing. He looks like a clever little player. And, what I didn't expect was this kind of, I was going to say warrior. It's not, I don't really like the word, but like this kind of industrious player, someone who had complete energy, rarely missed a game. I remember he dislocated his shoulder and he was back within 4 weeks or something. They said that's not really normal. would play 90 minutes week in, week out. And you know what? I truly believe this. I think if we had Josh Cullen for the whole of that first season when we got promoted in under Bowyer, we could even have been top 2. Like we missed him for I think he was out for 2 months with a shoulder injury and an ankle injury maybe. And if that didn't happen, then I think he would have been 100% a player who would have got us even closer. And same with the championship, he missed something like 10 games. He missed the first couple of games, I think, and then we got injured for a couple of weeks, and we missed him then. And again, it's those sort of matches where we could have picked up an extra 3 or 4 points, and that'd been an extra point would have been enough. But then after us, he goes to Anderlecht, and I think they won the title with him, or did really well. I can't remember what happened. And then he went to Burnley and got promoted in Premier League and was one of their best players, played almost every single game, and got promoted to the Premier League. So I'm really pleased to see he's gone on to have a really good career, and Burnley fans absolutely love him. I'm not sure if he's quick enough to be a Premier League player, but for me, an outstanding Championship player. I think he's so intelligent. And he would have been our captain after Jason Pearce. If we had kept him, he would have been our captain. And for a player to come to us for 2 loan spells and make such an impact, I had to have him on this list. And like I said, he's probably he's definitely one of my favourite players commentating on, and what a nice human being as well.
So basically, he follows company, doesn't he? I'm guessing he goes to Anderlecht and then comes over. Do you think that
he's waiting for the Bayern Munich call now? he's like, come on, mate, come on.
Do you think he goes to? Does he get another move, or do you reckon he stays at Burnley?
I think he stays. I think he was. I don't think he was a regular last season. I think he had a couple of good games, but I think he's a player that if he had broke through at West Ham, could have been there a while. I don't see him being a top 10 Premier League player, so I don't think anyone's going to kind of sign him with the ambition of. Plus, he's a bit older now. I think he's 28. I think. Right. So he's not a 26-year-old where you think, we could have 10 years of him here. So I think he's done brilliantly in his career. He's had a lot of good memories at different clubs, and I think Burnley will be looking to try and get him back promoted to the Premier League again. If he's settled and living nearby and happy, then that will matter to him.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think it has to go to you there, mate, because as much as you might even know more about Zizi than me in those championship years. What
is it? Is it? No, it's someone else, isn't it? Song.
Sorry. Yes. And
if you want Zenji in there so bad, mate, we'll
he's great. I loved him. He was brilliant. So you've got 2 completely different players there. You've got someone who goes on to have an incredible career, plays for Barcelona, plays pretty much at the top of the game. And then you've got Cullen, who's done well and actually did move on and do well after us, but maybe is not quite at that level, but had a bigger impact at the club. Do you stick with Cullen? I mean,
I think you summed up perfectly. Sons clearly was and is the better player. I don't know if he's still playing actually, but was the better player.
Yeah,
Josh Cullen was the better loanee for us, if that makes sense. So yeah. I would say Josh.
Fair enough. I mean, we did get relegated when he was there, so with Song. So
we did with Josh, to be fair, from the championship.
Oh, yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah, and from the bloody championship. There you go. Okay, we're going to go on to our second choices, our penultimate choices. I'm going to go with your one first because he is a lot more relevant at the moment. It is this man. Conor Gallagher, he's good, wasn't he?
He was very good, mate. Yeah, I was absolutely gutted when I found he was going.
What it felt like was right. What it felt like Lampard did was gone, you lot are a bit shit. He's your best player. So, no, we're going to have him back and give him someone else. So, like, kick us when we're fucking down. Like, he's the only one doing anything, playing well, keeping us alive. And then
it was purely financial, sadly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as you know, that January transfer window when we had people like Matt Southall in the building, there were a lot of players who we were saying we're going to sign and we didn't have any money to. And I think word got around that we didn't basically have money to spend in that January transfer window. And there was a lot of clubs after Connor in that January window, even on a permanent basis. And I think Swansea, their manager was Steve Cooper, who knew him really well from England under 17s, 18s. And they signed 3 or 4. I think Mark Gay was in that team of Swansea. Yeah. They signed 3 or 4 that summer and then added a couple as well who had played in that team. So it was kind of sold to him that come to us, you're not going to improve because you're not going to sign any players. And then they offered Chelsea more wage money. So we couldn't compete. And I think Connor was aware of what was going on, albeit not as much as others. And I think, I personally think he would have rather have stayed, but it was kind of his hand was kind of full.
He seemed settled and he seemed to be enjoying his football, didn't he?
Yeah, it was a poor decision for Chelsea because he actually would have benefited from playing in a struggling team more because that Swansea team did nothing. And I don't think he even really impressed that much for Swansea. And I think, but the thing is, Chelsea didn't think about him being a potential captain for them in 2024. They clearly just thought we could make a bit of money on him in the future. Yeah. And that's the sad reality of their model at the time was we sign players who are young, loan them out. I mean, they're still doing it now, to be honest. And then we don't really care what happens to them. If they're unbelievable, we might make some money or they might come in our first team. There's no structured plan for them. Yeah. And Connor was a player who is a Chelsea fan. He always wanted to dream. His dream was to play for Chelsea, but he learned so much under Bowyer and was at that time one of the best players in the Championship. That I think hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I think he'd have rather have stayed and kept us up and learned so much more of those next 6 months.
Well, I was talking about earlier, and Gallagher's one of those ones where you look at centre midfield players who learn a lot and scrap. Every game that England played, everyone, like, anytime we needed to get the ball back and we're out of possession, I was like, right, now they need to bring on Gallagher because Gallagher's going to go out there and win you the ball back. And that's what Lineker, that's what Shearer was saying. And who do you learn that best from? Lampard, yeah, he's going to teach you how to hit a ball from 40 yards. But Bowyer's the one who's going to teach you how to scrap. He's the one who's going to teach you how to win the ball when the other team's keeping hold of it. And I think that was a big draw for players like him and Cullen to play under a player like that who's going to be able to teach you how to do the hard graft as well. Because there's not a lot of I'm going to think of 100 managers now that played the same position like that. But Bowyer was one of the best, definitely.
Yeah, but we also had people like Darren Prattley in the dressing room, who weren't afraid to do that side of the game as well. So he came into a dressing room full of confidence after the summer that had just happened at Wembley, a fan base that was still living off of that as well.
Yeah.
And when we started the season so well, we beat Blackburn away. And I'll never forget, I was commentating on that game, first game of the season, Blackburn away, and it was 1-1. And Gallagher comes on, and his first touch was a ball. So the ball was played into his feet, and it was a ball around the corner. So he on the half turn, he's facing the wrong way, and he gets the ball like that. And most players, especially loans, would take a touch, go backwards to get themselves into the game. He was a substitute. Yeah. This ball's been fizzed into him, and first time he's done this ball around the corner and released it to whoever was our right wing or right wing back that day, down the right hand side. They cross it, get a corner. We then score from the corner. And I referenced that on comms and saying like that was that little bit of play. You watch professional football, like Premier League football, you can almost take it for granted. Yeah. When you watch it in the Championship and League One, and when you watch other games in League Two, National League, you start picking up these things that those players can't really do. Yeah, even really talented players at that level. And then Bowyer post-match, I think I might have asked a question about Gallagher. The thing that really impressed me was that first ball was a ball around the corner, and it wasn't like 2 or 3 touches. He said he's going to be a special player. And that's when I went, okay, we've got a player here. If Bowie is noticing this and saying this, then we've got a hell of a player. So, and then he scored against Stoke, I think our second game. And it was kind of given a free role behind the strikers, but it was perfect to the way we set up because we were a counter-attacking team. We weren't necessarily a
he likes Diamond, didn't he? And
yeah. And he was the tip of that diamond. Yeah. He was brilliant for us. And considering he was only with us for 6 months, there's a lot of moments to stand out. I mean, beating Derby 3-0 was one of my highlights that season. And we came away from that game thinking, we could compete for playoffs here, and we know what ended up happening after that. But he was brilliant, and even when the times got tough, he didn't hide. We played, actually, funny enough, Derby away, and another name we've already mentioned, Christian Bielik, after the first 5 minutes, got sent off. It was a horrendous challenge. He was playing for Derby, and smashed into Connor, and Connor got left with a massive gash on his shin, I think it was. And for the rest of the game, Derby fans were giving him absolute pelters, thinking he was diving and he was faking it. And I called them the cauldron of whinge because to our right, it was just moan, boo, boo, boo. And we all knew that Connor was injured. And then after the game, Bielik was in the tunnel and Bowyer went up to him and, Christian, what did you do that for? And Christian was like, I'm so sorry, Gaffer. I'm so sorry, boss. But Connor, like in that game, we lost 2-1, I think, but we had such a youthful side, and Connor did not hide. He was getting battered by players. Players are going in physical. He had a gash on his leg, and he was still the most impressive player on the pitch. So it's not a surprise he's got on and done great things. And I still don't think he's quite reached potentially his potential. I don't think we know what his best position is still. For Chelsea, he's played in the 10 and he's probably not scoring enough goals and creating enough to warrant that position on a full-time basis for a club like Chelsea. But then he's played in an 8 where he's not the best defensively. So he, for me, is the perfect player for sides that might not dominate the ball, but dominates kind of territory. You can look at Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp. They loved midfielders who weren't maybe the best on the ball, but would press and would counter and have got energy and intensity. And he is that player. So I think there might be a chance he leaves Chelsea, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes and how he develops his game.
Yeah, I was going to ask you whether you think he's got a big move in him this summer. I mean, nothing's happened yet, but I've seen a few teams come in for him. I really liked him. I think the biggest compliment I can give him is he's the best midfielder I'd seen since Scott Parker. I think in terms of box to box player, because that's what you used to be. You'd have a box to box player, Brian Robson, someone like that, who would just he'd do the dirty work and sprint out the pitch and create something. But he seemed to have all that doggedness about him, winning the ball back. But he also had that technical ability. He could bend it in a corner, scored some great goals. I mean, for me, he's one of the best we've had for a very long time in the centre of midfield. But I'll give you one better, or at least who I think was better, and he only played 18 times for us, but he left a massive impact on me. It was this guy here.
Wind is swirling in towards that goal. It's Smertin. Well hit off the bar.
Now, again, hard to get a good clip of him playing in a Charlton shirt, but I cannot tell you how much I liked Alex Smertin. When he was playing with Danny Murphy, I think that was the best centre midfield pairing we've had, because you had Murphy, who was very creative, played some amazing balls through, but I've never seen someone work as hard as Smertin. He covered every blade of grass, and he was rapid, like getting around everyone. I only weighed about 9 stone, wasn't particularly tall, but he was everywhere. He just worked so hard to get the ball back, to the point where Chelsea had loaned him to us. I think they got a bit pissed off that they were competing with us, and then took him off us and gave him to Portsmouth, because he was an unbelievable player. Do you remember, were you at many games when he was around? Because this is later on, I'm sure you were.
Yeah, that was the season. I think that might have been the first season I had a season ticket, or second season I had a season ticket. I can't remember. But yeah, I think you're ever so slightly wrong in terms of how he left that. Didn't he go back to Russia? I'm sure he went back to Russia.
Right. Yeah, I think he was at Pompey before us, wasn't he?
Yeah. Because that's why I seem to remember us signing him and thinking, no, he was at Portsmouth.
They took him back to Chelsea, didn't they? That's what I mean.
They did, and then they sold him permanently. I think he
Smerton
wanted
to
to go back
Dynamo
to
Moscow, and then he went to Fulham after that. Because
Yeah.
it's weird because he went from us to Chelsea, back to Chelsea because he did so well, and then they sold him to Moscow, and then he comes back and plays for Fulham, which is really annoying. But yeah.
Yeah, he was a good mate. I think it's a great shout. I think it could have got in mine, to be fair. I think off the top of my head, I didn't think he played that many games, but he definitely did. Well, he did in terms of he played enough. In my head, he played like 8, but how many did you say?
18 games he played for us.
Yeah, so he probably played similar to Gallagher.
Yeah, Gallagher. I mean, Gallagher's played 26 and scored 6 goals, whereas
that's 8 more games. So yeah, I mean, but I'm like you. I remember that midfield being really good. I think Kishishek had a really good start to the season as well, and we had like a midfield 3, and they were the 3. And you had the 2 kind of workers in Kishishek and Smertin that opened up space for Murphy.
Yeah, and you had Ben up as well. Like that was an unbelievable team we had at that point.
Yeah, I think it's a really good shout, man. I like Smertin a lot. So this is a hard call.
It's not an easy one, is it? I think the thing with Smertin is he goes on to do a lot as well. He plays 55 times for Russia. He's involved in the coaching side of it. He does a lot of stuff in politics and that kind of thing. Gallagher played in the Euros. Like, you can't say more than that. He also played for Palace. So,
that's a good shout. I was going to say the Euros things wins it, but I feel a bit dirty.
In the Euros, I was very much like, oh, I'm glad Gallagher's there, but I honestly, I see him more of a Palace player now than a Charlton player.
Oh, I don't. No, I don't. No. If he joined them permanently and then they sold him to Chelsea, then maybe. But no, he only.
Let me tell you how many games he scored. This could do it. This could be it. So Gallagher played 26 times for us, and he scored 6 goals. Palace, he played 34 times and scored 8 goals. So,
yeah, mate, I'm not as worried as you are. Like I like my brother-in-law was a Palace fan, so like
what?
I can.
You're telling me this now? Oh my god!
Yeah, I can cope with it. Luckily, my other half is fully Charlton, so it's all good. But yeah, I can cope with it. So I'm saying Gallagher.
I don't know if I can, but you're the one doing the fucking commentary, so there we go. All right.
I'm the premium guest, apparently.
But we can afford that.
Okay, yeah. All right.
And it's got nothing else to do at 4:45 on Wednesday. All right, okay, there we go. Well, you've won it. You won it 3-1. You could have gone to 2-2 then and kept it interesting, but no, fine. We'll go for it.
Okay.
But then, okay. So
who is your number one? Can we go you first?
I want to go me first. Okay.
Yeah, let's finish.
So this is one I genuinely love. So this I had this argument. I love Dean Kiley, right? Dean Kiley, one of my favourite goalkeepers I've ever seen, was fantastic. When he left, I didn't think there could be anyone. I was like, no, we're going to get someone shit. Someone's going to come in, never going to be as good. This guy turns up, and I fell in love.
City looking for an equaliser in stoppage time towards Dickoff. This is Samaras. Wonderful stop from Scott Carson. That was goal all the way from Georgios Samaras. Fantastic one-handed stop from Carson.
So Scott Carson, on loan from Liverpool, England international. He's got no teeth. I mean, what more do you want? What more do you want from a goalkeeper? He was absolutely.
I can give you something. He opened Bexley Heath shopping centre lights at Christmas.
I genuinely like when Scott Carson came in. I remember being so gutted that we didn't have Dean Kiley anymore. He'd been an absolute hero. Carson came in and I was like, this is a level above. He gets a lot of stick from what people remember of him in England because he had that wobble.
Yeah.
But he was an unbelievable keeper. He was so solid. I remember us all singing England's number one and like in the crowd, like that would constantly get shouted out. Like he was first name on the team sheet, and every week he delivered. He played 36 times for us. I think it was every game. I think he started every game that season, pretty much. And I think we were really lucky to get him.
Yeah, he would have only missed. He missed the 2 Liverpool games, didn't he? That's the only 2 he missed. Every game he could play, he did play. Yeah. He was. Yeah, I completely agree. I think he got a Player of the Year that year. He was on my shortlist.
I think he's the only. I think him and Rak-Sakyi are the only players who won Player of the Year while being on loan. Gallagher won Player of the Month while he was with us as well. But in terms of Player of the Year, they're the only two.
Yeah, and again, it's another example that if we stayed up, we might have been the club that signed him permanently, and yeah, number one. I mean, even now, he's still involved now, isn't he?
He's still at City, isn't it? This is the thing as well. So Scott Carson, he's still at Man City. I think he's got something like 3. No, how many Premier Leagues has he won? So he's got more. He's probably got more medals than all of the other players we talked about combined, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends if he counts for getting a medal or not. I don't know.
I think he does. I mean, there's a lot of talk about. So I've heard recently, I've been listening to a lot of football podcasts, and they talk about good travellers, good tourists. So people who go on tour and are good to have around the club. He's been with City since 2019, and he didn't go there as a main goalkeeper. I think he scored. Yeah, he's played once. He's played once for Manchester City, and that's why he was on loan. And he's been there for 5 years. Now, I'm not saying that's what makes him a great keeper, but that's what makes him a great squad player. You want players in your team like that who are happy to help out and are going to keep the morale high. I mean, he was fantastic for us as a player, but he's proven to go on and be one of the best players to have around the place. Definitely.
Yeah, it can't be underestimated how important that is when you're spending time. I mean, you think of it if your place at work or where you've worked before, where you've most enjoyed your work is probably where you've been the most successful.
Yeah.
And some people like to be boring and miserable and get on with their day job, come home and go to bed and whatnot. But I think the majority of people will say working with a good squad is what makes you successful. And I think you look at Scott Carson's character. It's a main reason why Man City are able to achieve what they achieve. Money is
a big part, isn't it?
Yeah, the money side obviously helps, but they've got a lot of characters in that Man City side, and I don't think that's a coincidence either. But as a goalkeeper for Charlton, he was great in a really poor team to begin with. As we mentioned, the second half of the season was a bit better, but the first half of that season was dreadful, and he was again a shining light. And I remember a lot of saves like the one you just showed in the video there. And I think you're right. I think it's just a shame that because I saw him as a future England number one for a few years, and he got given that Croatia game when he should never have played in it, to be honest. Such a crucial game for an inexperienced goalkeeper at international level and on a horrible night, and made that howler and never really recovered. In his career either, in my opinion, he never really because he started really well. Was it Aston Villa he was at?
Yeah. He was at Leeds, first of all, 03 to 05, but only played 3 times, then goes to Liverpool, gets loaned out to Sheffield Wednesday, us and Villa, then goes to West Brom, and that's where he has his first long-term spell, plays 110 times, played every day for Villa the next year as well that he could play.
You look at the after Charlton on loan, he's at Aston Villa on loan, and that's where I remember that Aston Villa side was really good, and that's when he got the England opportunity in 2007. So that could have been us on a permanent basis, it could have been us again on loan, and it's completely different. I don't really remember him from West Brom. I don't really remember him standing out or doing really, really well. So as I say, I don't know if his career ever got to where it should have done. But I think we're talking about best loans for Charlton, and he was one of our best loans, no question about it.
I think it's rare that you get someone like we've talked about a lot of centre midfielders, and the thing with centre midfield is that you need to learn the game. You need to learn the game to be able to play at the highest level. So the centre midfield is the perfect position to learn the game. Whereas keeper, you've got to be good. Like you've got to come in and hit the ground running. You've got to be ready for that position, haven't you? You've got to be a mainstay goalkeeper. That's very different, I think. And for him to be so reliable and so on it every game, for me, that goes a long way. But I've got to be honest, because for someone who gets in the all-time fantasy 11 as a lone player, it's going to be very hard to beat your choice, which isn't this guy here, but it's who this guy here is talking about.
I had captains that they were not leaders. And people, normally the connection is the armband, this guy is the captain, this guy is the leader. No, many times the captain is not a leader. So I think you touched exactly in the point. These two guys, they were leaders. And when you have these leaders, you become more a coach. You focus more on the coaching side of it. I had one in Porto, Josh Costa, that one day we were losing a game against a team called Belenenses. We were losing 2-0 at halftime. And I was walking to the dressing room, and of course they could all see that I was fuming. And when I was going to the dressing room, Josh Costa told me, wait outside 2 minutes, please. He went inside, he closed the door, he did the dirty job for me. So he opened the door then, and he told me, coach this. Because he did in the dressing room everything that I would do. We won 3-2. He was a central defender. He never scored goals in his life. He scored 2. He scored 2 goals. He never scored a goal in his life, I think. So you touch exactly the point. The captain and the leader, and it's a big difference. You don't buy leaders. You don't make leaders. And when you have them, your team is one step ahead. But unfortunately, football.
So that's Jose Mourinho talking about George Costa. Mourinho, who had Terry, Zanetti, some of the best captains, some of the best leaders ever, and he rates Costa that highly. I mean, we've spoken about him a lot on the pod, on the channel in the past, because he's a lot of people's first choice, which means he's kind of guaranteed for this. But why Costa? Why do you love him so much?
Because there's a couple of reasons, but the first one is because that was the first player that I really loved. So when I started seeing Charlton, we've gone through this in my Fantasy 11, but I wasn't a Charlton fan when I first started going in 2001. My dad took me because it was the local team, and and I went there as I'll watch Man United, and I watch the best players in the world week in, week out on Match of the Day, and I love Paul Scholes and David Beckham, and and you go to watch Charlton, and as I mentioned earlier, maybe with Bartlett, you get a little bit more, I don't know, like workhorses. You get players who work really hard, but maybe haven't got the talent of those other Premier League players I've just mentioned. And that era of Charlton, we had a lot of that. We had players who'd give everything, and you loved them for that as a fan. But when you're looking at ability-wise, they weren't like, let's take a John Robinson, who you mentioned earlier, didn't have the ability. Didn't have the ability of a Klaus Jensen, but when you watch Klaus Jensen play, you're like, oh yeah, like as a 6-year-old, you go, oh yeah, he's pinging the ball 40 yards and he's scoring 20 yards. But when I first started playing football at the age of 6, 7, I was a defender, and I remember my dad going on about George Costa, like, oh, Charlton have signed this Portuguese centre half, like from Porto, like it's quite a cool signing, on loan. We're signing a player who plays for Portugal. It's quite a cool signing for a team like Charlton, who before that our star signing might have been a player who did really well in the Championship the year before. So it was quite a cool signing. And then you watched him, and he did things, and his movement as a defender, the way he read the game, the way he out-muscled players, the way he outpaced players, yet he didn't have any pace.
Yeah.
And he was this his nickname was Tank, wasn't it? He was a tank, and he was. And usually you don't really care about centre-halves when they're on loan. If they fill in, they do the job, great. But we had a player who came in with a reputation of being a good leader, as that clip showed, and a good player, and he was fantastic, and he's a cult hero. We Charlton fans who are alive and saw him play will say that will pick their favourite Charlton team, and George Costa might be in there. And for a lone player to have that impact culturally on a club is very, very rare. So for me, it was a no-brainer to have him at the top of my list.
What's amazing is he had that big of an impact, and he only played 24 times. I think I thought he was there at least the full season, but he made such a big impact. I mean, to have the only catchphrase that Charlton have really had, "Young fish cost a fortune," named after him, that goes a long way. And he just, when you think about that as well, and I think about it more now, like you had Powell on the left, you had Young on the right, so two relatively experienced, but Fortune came up through the academy. He'd never really, that's like Lucas Ness basically last season or the season before. it made so much sense. Young Fish cost a fortune. Fish was another sort of an old head as well, but it works so well because you had Fortune to do the running, but you never really need to do it because Costa was always in the right place anyway. Does Brownie ever talk about him? Is there,
I was going to say I've definitely heard a story about George, but I've never really spoke to him about him. Curbs is the one who spoke about him on Charlton TV before. So yeah, I'll have to ask Brownie about him because they were competing for the same position. So Brownie might not.
Well, I think they were there. I remember them playing in the same kit, so I assume Brownie was still in the squad when he came in.
Brownie was, yeah. So when I first started watching Charlton, Brownie played for us. So yeah, that was the season of the famous handball by Brownie that happened in September. Before Costa joined, so Brownie was definitely still around. But yeah, I don't know. We'll try and find some stat if they actually played together at any point, or whether Brownie was injured or Brownie played right back or whatever. But that was an enjoyable season to get into Charlton because we just had the 4-2 against Arsenal before I just started watching us. And you know, the Brownie moment I just mentioned there, having George Costa, Jason Newell signed that summer, record signing. So it felt like a really good time to start watching Charlton. So I was very lucky to be able to watch players like that before we started getting a bit crap.
All these stories that you talk about with Brownie, that's the next job of this podcast, is to try and get some of those stories out of you or Brownie, because I'd love to know more. Because to imagine him and Costa in the same dressing room exchanging stories, and because I mean Brownie was a similar, obviously played same position, but played it in a similar way as well. Brownie wasn't known for his pace. When you listen to him talk, it's like he barely had any knees left either at that time.
Well, he's having a knee surgery like
is he?
In a week's time.
So,
right,
okay.
Quite convenient. I think it might even be this weekend. Yeah, it's quite convenient timing.
But it'd be interesting to know how he kind of remembers that, because Brownie seems very humble in the sense that he doesn't seem like he was ever owed a position, like Kerbishley owed him anything. So I wonder how he looks back at that. Does he look back at it as going, oh, there's someone else coming in and nicking my place, or I'm going to learn a lot from this guy? And I did learn a lot from him, because it was sort of towards the tail end of his time at Charlton as well, wasn't it, I guess?
Yeah, I imagine it's a bit of both. I don't think Brownie ever feels... I think the only thing Brownie ever regrets is the injuries he picked up. I don't think he was happy with the treatment of the club with his injury, and his surgery, and how all that went, rather than someone like Curbs or the people in the hierarchy like Peter Varney or Richard Murray. Like, they gave him a lot of support. I think it was more the kind of like treatment and the way the surgery. I think the first surgery he ever had was an absolute disgrace. So
yeah, I heard that.
As you say, he's so humble. I don't think, if I'd say George Costa, he'll tell me a few really funny things. He won't say, oh yeah, I hated him, or oh, he nicked my positions, I don't really want to talk about him. He's not like that. So I'll get a story out of him for another time.
I think that's a great example as well, Costa, of just being a London club. That's what you can do. You can attract that. I mean, if you look at Palace now, like, they have been attracting good players for a long time, but that has definitely helped them with Eze, Elise, some of the bigger players they're bringing in now from Brazil and that sort of thing. Like, just being a London club is what got us Costa. Like, just the fact that we were in London, he needed somewhere to play, just to get back in the Portuguese team. Like, it went a long way. So, I mean, the Kerbishley story, I'll have to dig out this Kerbishley story about how he actually got hold of Costa. Do you know it very well? Or because
I think it was all to do with a scout we had. I think I mentioned his name before. I can't remember it. I think he got made aware that this player is available. I think the scout's Portuguese as well, and I think it was a case of, right, let's get him in. We needed a bit of cover or experience, and then he went back and the following year won the Champions League with Mourinho at Porto, didn't he? So,
I mean, if we're looking at judging these loans, because you can't judge them on business, so you're looking at them on kind of how their career developed. There's not going to be many that have won the Champions League. I mean, Song is up there because he goes on to Barcelona and he plays at the highest level. He actually, I mean, Song only played 12 games for us, so he played half the games. But yeah, I think you have to give it to Costa based just on that alone, really.
Yeah, and I think we talk about impact at club, as I mentioned, culturally. he's still, his name still gets sung every
Yeah.
now and then in Charlton now, and I think for a lone player to have that is incredibly rare. So yeah, it's when we spoke about doing these, this is the opportunity to talk about these players, these legends of the club. So we have to put him in as a cult hero.
And I think he gets the win. All right, so you win that one 4-1, and it's an absolute drubbing. I've got to go away and have a think about things, I think. And maybe I don't let you choose first for the.
Well, I was going to say that is a caveat that I do feel is a bit harsh. Like I'm getting to choose first, especially something like loans where most of them have happened since I've been a fan.
Yeah.
The whole point of me saying I'll do it since I've been a fan is to try and give a bit of balance. But yeah, what's next? I want to know what's next.
Well, the next one I think will be academy players.
Oh, this will be tough.
That's going to be hard, isn't it? Unless there's any. So I think we've covered them all. So now we've done paid transfers, free transfers. The other one we haven't done, which I think will be very fun, is the worst signings. And I feel like we've done an hour and a half on loans. I feel like we could be here all day on worst transfers, but they're the two up for grabs. It's academy versus worst ever signings. What do you think we should do next?
I think we should do academy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Let's try and work out a date for that, and we can. It gives us time to work out a proper list. And I'll let you go first.
Maybe we pick one each. So rather than our little nattering on WhatsApp before that we do, we just go, right, this is my first choice. This is my next choice. And the 5 people that are watching, thank you very much for joining us. It'd be nice to hear you voting every now and again on some of these, because at the moment I'm just letting Greg choose who he wants to win. And here we go. Stephen Parr, Scott Carson Mawson, definitely best one we've had. Thanks, Stephen. It's a bit late now because I've already given it to Greg. Would you, Stephen? Would you actually give it to Carson over Costa though? I think Costa's kind of got it tied up. I think it's very hard to say anyone's been better than Costa. I agree with you, Greg. So we'll go for that. We'll go for George Costa to be the best ever. Please comment in the comments below. Let us know what you thought on all those little battles and who you feel better. Oh, here we go. Came in late. Hello, Dan, bro. How you doing? Oh, I've started it. I haven't. See, I'm trying to learn all this technical stuff. There we go. I only been listening the last 10 minutes. Don't worry, Dan. That's fair enough. I mean, we're very lucky that we both work from home, and Greg doesn't seem to have a proper job at the moment, so he's able to start these at 4:45. And I've got a little girl to put. That sounded weird. I've got my little girl to put to bed at 7 o'clock. So that's what I'll be back. So yeah, we'll try and do the next one maybe at a decent time. We've also, what is it we got tonight, Greg? What's the thing over on Charlton TV?
Yeah, I'm not being paid for this. It's not like Jeff Hurst and the Budweiser thing. It's not that. But yeah, there's a Charlton TV preview show tonight. So any Charlton fans who have enjoyed the last 10 minutes, even the last minute of our witterings, then go on to cfc.co.uk. There is a preview show on Charlton TV tonight with Scotty, Brownie, Curbs, Kevin Lisby. I make an appearance halfway through as well. If they've decided to keep it, I'll talk about our new signings. But it was pretty rubbish. So I wouldn't be surprised they don't keep it. But
see, they need someone charismatic to come in there and bring the life out of
people.
Well,
they kind of briefed me and said, oh, there's we wanted to talk about new signings. I said, oh, cool, yeah, fine. So I thought about like what I'm going to say about each one. Oh, he's really dynamic. He's a box-to-box player. And then I got there and my mate James, who works at the club, said, all right, we want you to include all these facts. So he's giving me all these facts, and I'm trying to present to camera with these facts. And I'm like, this is going through my head, this. But no, I'm sure it's fine.
So what's the setup? They're not doing this live then tonight. They're doing...
yeah, it is live. Yeah. I don't know what time, actually. That wasn't on my agreed advertising for this show contract.
Your bit was pre-recorded, and they might chip it in.
Okay. Yeah. It's only like literally a minute. But it's a discussion about the summer. They're trying to bring these shows on a regular basis to replace what was pre-match and post-match. So it's kind of like a monthly kind of magazine style show. So it's the same production team, the same setup, look and feel. So hopefully it'll be a good, nice little show, and Brownie will bring you some of his thoughts on what he's seen in pre-season as well.
That's going to be good, because I'm going to miss those so much. Even if I didn't watch the game, I'd always watch the pre-match match back, just to see, because I love them talking. I love to hear the stories. I love hearing Kirbishley and Brownie talking just about what's going on, and hearing Scott Minto and those listening to those guys talk, and obviously yourself when you did you hosted it a couple of times, which I thought you did very well. That was just nice to have people talking about Charlton, because it doesn't happen, does it? That doesn't happen very often. So that kind of is what spurred on this channel, and we'll definitely keep them going. I've got a few big plans to do the Charlton 11 next year, but there's also talk about trying to do a bit more about what's gone on last week, and I'm trying to persuade Greg to join me on that regularly, but we'll have to see how they go. But guys who are listening, Dan Bro, Stephen, if you guys can give us a shout, give us a like, give us a subscribe, let your mates know. I do need to do more advertising for this and try and get the numbers up and that sort of thing, but they're fun, aren't they? I'm really enjoying them, and these little transfer specials have been good. The Academy one will be next, and that me and Greg will talk about when we're going to do that. God knows, try and do a more reasonable time maybe, and try and do let you know more than a day before, because I only mentioned this, I only put this on the YouTube channel earlier today. But yeah, we'll try and get that one sorted out. I can already think of a couple. It's going to be hard. There's a lot of Academy players that you'd look at getting in there, and I'm 100% not letting you choose all 5 first, because there's already 3 that I can think of that I don't want to have to go against.
Yeah, mate, I'll start thinking now. Yeah, no, it'll be good fun. I've always enjoyed it, mate, and thank you to everyone who tunes in as well. We'll continue to do this for sure.
Thanks, guys. See you next time. Lots of love. Cheers, Greg.
Cheers, guys.
And now we just sit